Hey, I got this new book. It's called Notes on Inner Work, in question with Michel de Salzmann. And I just thought I would start reading it with you. I started to scan the pages and I really liked what I read. I'll give you a brief foreword. Hopefully we can get through the foreword and preface pretty quickly because the first chapter has some really great stuff in it. All right, the memorable words which comprise the reason for and the content of this collection are those of Dr. Michel de Salzmann, born 1923, passed away 2001. A direct student of G.I. Gurdjieff, he was in charge of the work in Geneva for decades. Work is the designation for Gurdjieff's teaching. He was also the inspired facilitator of work sessions that took place every summer at Chandelin in the Valais Alps, and attracted searchers from various continents. Why make a collection, one might ask? Because in them one finds the demand, the depth, and the freedom of the searcher who was Michel, and because, bearing witness to the quality of his presence, these words continue to call us to the essential, that is to say, quite simply, to be in the moment. So provided, of course, that we listen to them without expectations or prejudices, they can touch us like certain music that resonates deep in ourselves. Then, with the heart and spirit seated with their light, these words have the power to awaken in us a new and authentic understanding, accompanied by a feeling of gratitude for the one who thus opens the way for us. Such precious moments over time have formed the essence of the spiritual bond that unites us with Michel. This is why some students, fearing to lose contact forever with these blessed moments or to distort them, have made every effort after the fact to preserve their content. As there was no question in Geneva or Chandelin to count on a recording, all that remained was to take written notes at the time or afterwards. Then there is a risk that the subjectivity of the person who transcribes these words exerts an influence on their choice and their formatting. For example, what is enlightening or even overwhelming to one person may seem ordinary to another. Hence the need for editorial work undertaken by a small group of people convinced by the importance of giving these confidential notes the wide resonance they deserve. Coming from the notebooks of two of the students, Michel's words are set in Geneva or Chandelin. They take various forms, sometimes brief and impactful, like aphorisms, sometimes more or less long, depending on the listeners and the subjects covered. Despite the passage of time, may they continue to play their role and bring strength and encouragement to all seekers on the path. Jean-Pierre Marville. All right, and then that's the foreword, and here's the preface. Dr. Michel de Salzmann published little during his lifetime. These new notes will then enrich and complete a teaching that once heard cannot be forgotten. Because all of his texts are characterized, one could say, by a high level of lucidity, developed in particular by his profession as a psychiatrist, but that cannot sufficiently explain their full significance. The value of this teaching lies in the fact that everyone can recognize in it the call of a higher reality and can be touched by it. The informed reader can realize this by reading Man's Ever New and Eternal Challenge, one of two presentations at conferences. So the title is Man's Ever New and Eternal Challenge by Michel de Salzmann in On the Way to Self-Knowledge, which is published by Alfred A. Knopf. The other presentation is Seeing, the Endless Source of Inner Freedom, also by Michel de Salzmann in Material for Thought. It looks like it's from a publication, a periodical, number 14 by Far West Editions. These invite us to question the mirage which takes the place of our existence, one absorbed by the demands of the world, where questioning that calls for a special attention has less and less place. Michel always took great care in the way he addressed an audience, groups of seekers, or the invited public. He had a true inclination for language, but knew that speech alone is not free to express itself according to the thought that guides it. Quite simply because speech remains under the influence of emotions and bodily attitudes. It turns out that while believing we are saying what we feel internally, we often barely touch on the real substance of what we are experiencing. That is why he often insisted on the need to be precise in describing what was experienced, but even more to keep watch that a more collected state supports us in the sharing. What he delivered was not a lesson in rhetoric. It was a call to speak from a location within oneself, situated at the exact intersection of the forces that govern us, the place of an authentic source. When this presence is there, verified, unmistakable, then sincere conscious speech finds its way in the silence. His words, whatever the circumstances that gave rise to them, always had a tone corresponding to what was coming to life in that very moment. That is the reason why his words inscribed themselves deeply in memory and why they became memorable, as Jean-Pierre Marville writes in his foreword. Another crucial aspect to take into account is that when reading them, one must never lose sight of the fact that these words are associated with an oral context. One must then conceive of a rare atmosphere of opening, irrigated both by the active listening of the participants and the voice of Michel, its texture, its intonations, its silences. A text, of course, cannot restore the quality of an embodied presence, of exchanges nourished through observations made during experiences and the inner experiences proposed. But it can lead, through sensitive reading, to an immediate and active understanding. That is the whole point of this publication. It is to Jean-Pierre Marville and the late Pascal Blanc that the reader owes the ability today to read these notes, taken between 1983 and 2000, and whose content was initially intended for students engaged in the search proposed by Gurdjieff. But there is no doubt that they will be of interest to all those who question the meaning of their life, and who fundamentally believe that the quest for knowledge is never complete, because in reality it begins again with each dawn that breaks. Juan Martinez. All right, getting into the first section. It's called An Evening of Exchanges, and it comes from a talk given by Michel de Salzmann at Chandelin in October in 1986, following a toast to the eternal return. Question from the pupil. In one's life, one can see recurring situations take place. Can this phenomenon go beyond the frame of this life? Michel. Someone would have to prove it to me. To address this question, one must better understand the multiple states of being and the significance of the passage from one state to another state, as suggested by the table of hydrogens, as seen in Fragments of an Unknown Teaching by P.D. Ouspensky. A material can be inhabited by another finer one. What can survive? When people speak about this question, they imagine themselves able to reincarnate as they are in their own eyes, with the same interests, even the same physical abilities. In fact, people do not know themselves and have an idea of their completely imaginary selves, which is nothing but the result of their projections, their fantasies. Such a thing obviously has no more chance of survival than the body. One must be wary of magical thinking. We do not know the body, its needs, and its shortcomings. Of course, if one eats with attention, one can constate that by eating certain things, there is an influence on the body's functioning. Some foods have a tamasic effect, passive, heavy; others a rajasic, active, impassioning; others sattvic, pure, luminous, and that can reinforce the body's karma in certain recurrences. What is meditation? My body consciously submits to another energy. At first, it is not willing, but little by little the body wants it. It feels joy, even more, bliss. This energy is not the body. It comes from somewhere, perhaps from the planets, or even further away. It is perhaps immortal within the framework of the solar system. It needs the body to manifest itself and organize itself. That is what will constitute what we sometimes call the soul. This poses the question, is the soul universal or individual? Individuality is a mystery. Birth is the manifestation of the law of three, of which the nature of the third force remains unknown to us. Birth is not the meeting of two bodies. To understand this descent of energy in the body, it is important to learn to relax. This relaxation is an intermediate state. We cannot talk about the question of reincarnation like that in the state we are in now. To understand this question, another perception is required. Otherwise, it will be like astrology in modern life. It is partial, truncated. The next question. Is there a good or useful way to be an ordinary man? Michel. Can we answer such a question? You can answer it yourself. What is a seeker? A seeker sees that in relation to a question, certain people see in one way, others in another way. He considers for himself, experiments, and sees what is true in both ways of thinking, but each person is alone in this effort. Mr. Gurdjieff warned against explaining everything. To explain everything is to steal the experience of the other. Question from the same person. Is it useful to be polite, or should one give free rein to one's habitual manifestations, or must one contain them? Michel. A seeker is not a sorcerer's apprentice, a bomb thrower. It is annoying to live with someone who is constantly going against the grain in the situation and who disturbs the harmony and understanding among seekers by his or her outbursts. All men believe themselves to be extraordinary, especially when they suffer. That is where the problem lies. Turning to someone. X. You who are so discreet, tell us in what way you are extraordinary. X. You said it. It is my discretion that is extraordinary. Michel. Bravo, X. We have to push him to his limits. We can give only what we have received. And even the person who really does extraordinary things can feel that it is not he who is doing it, that he is only a channel. Question from a pupil. When I was in school, something in me found it unjust to be praised or rewarded for getting good grades. Michel. Really? Maybe, inside you, someone knew that you didn't deserve it, that it was unjustified. I remember my first essay when I was in a philosophy class, where I was one of the best. The professor returned it to me with the following comment. This is the most interesting work, but I gave it the worst grade. At the time, I didn't dare ask him why. I understood, however, that he had appreciated it, that something had been recognized. In contrast, take teenagers who compete in judo. At this first level, it may be the most thuggish, the most vicious, the most brutal who wins. He is entitled to first prize. He is a little scamp, perhaps because in his family environment he is not esteemed. He is despised. He can't do anything about it. However, in giving him first prize, we could do it in a way that helps him. You are first, but in fact you are last. This way he will understand his shortcomings. We help him because we call him to greater unity, to be more complete. This is how we can reward. In Japan, children are educated by telling them that they can't do that or say this because otherwise people will laugh. But it is very subtle because we are constantly on a tightrope. At the slightest fall, we sink into conformity, and not the perception of our role. A president of the republic whose acts engage the nation is more conscious of this notion of role than the majority of people. Mr. Gurdjieff said, outwardly play a role, inwardly be free. Question, isn't it characteristic of a sly man to make use of his subjectivity? Michel, yes, to go faster, but to go faster you first have to go very slowly. To be able to use one's subjectivity, one must have an overall, non-imaginary view of its functioning, understanding the movements within oneself of the different energies and let them adjust in relation to each other. This is very slow and takes years. To practice a real tea ceremony, you have to work for 20 years or more. For true remembering, it is exactly the same. This is the sly man's pill. It is grace. But what do we generally understand by that? It is unclear. In childhood or in churches, grace was associated with dubious emotional transport. Of this, Mr. Gurdjieff, in responding to someone who spoke to him about his devotion to the Blessed Virgin, said, "Your Blessed Virgin is a whore." It was not that he meant that the Virgin was actually a whore, but the image of the Virgin that his questioner created was fantastical and suspect. In another context, it is said, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. The image appears here as an obstacle to true grace. This can only descend into soil that has been worked. You see, there is an entirely different understanding of the sly man's pill. The sly man, he works without creating reactions. All right, well, that's the end of that section. There's some really good stuff in there. I'll back up. I think one quote, if I can find it. Let's see. Might be hard to find it on the fly. I wish I would have highlighted it. There's the quote, outwardly play a role, inwardly be free. That's very, very interesting. I think when one feels that he must be true to himself and he's pouring out all his expressions and taking up a lot of space in the room by being himself, quote unquote, saying everything that is on his mind and doing habitually everything he feels and acting on impulse, there's this selfishness in it becomes an obstacle to realization. In meditation, when he talks about relaxing the body and letting another energy in, that is almost the exact polar opposite of being boisterous, being flamboyant, fully who you are, expressing yourself in a room and taking up all the airspace. There's a listening and a meditation that, of course, meditation, there's sitting in a room alone, but there's the continual living that way when you're in a conversation or you're listening to other people talk. Are you really present? Are you really taking the energy in at that time? So playing a role on the outside would be being the listener, being the friend, being the helper, being the pal, being the humorist, being the storyteller. There's many roles that we can fill, and I've noticed that oftentimes our grandfathers or grandmothers from the generations before us, they understand this. They understand this, playing a role of jokester, and then playing the role of good husband, playing the role of grandfather, and really being the role. That true living is how we give ourselves to the situation. I grew up with some great grandfathers that really knew how to do that, and I'm grateful for that. I really like the part where he talks about meditation, and he says, at first the body's not willing, but little by little the body wants it. It feels joy, even more bliss. This energy is not the body. It comes from elsewhere. That's so spot on. I have done personal solo meditation or group meditation, and there's a lot of resistance. It's either apathy or social anxiety, or I would just say maybe those two are the big ones. Or the monkey mind, being chattery in my head and being restless in my body. And sometimes all of those constellate in one sitting, and I'm pulled in all these directions. But again, maybe going to playing the role on the outside and being free on the inside. I try to just play the role of meditator by breathing and by relaxing my body. I'm trying to fit into this instruction that my teacher has given me, even though that's not how I feel. And slowly, little by little, eventually, my body does let go. And maybe it's my mind letting my body go, but then there's something that feels more like the heart that understands there's a presence in the room that there's a certain energy flowing in the room that's very edifying, but I just have to be open to receive it. That happened to me not too long ago. I was in a group meditation and feeling very anxious and not feeling like I belonged there. And halfway through, so about 30 minutes in, that mind that I had of self-consciousness and uncomfortability, it was nowhere. I don't know where it went. But instead I was sitting with a peace and with a appreciation, a gratitude for everyone that showed up that night and for what was being shared. Because the way we do it is, if you feel called, if you feel called to share, then share. But it is really, there's an encouraging energy in the room to only share if you're really feeling the energy call you to share. Because we are working on a meditative pose. So we don't speak from our monkey mind. We try not to. We try not to mince words, as Michel de Salzmann talks about, being very specific with his wording. Talked about that in the preface. And Gurdjieff talks about that too, about how language is misunderstood between two people. And part of the fourth way, or the Gurdjieff work, is using language that was used by Gurdjieff and the de Salzmanns and understanding what that language means. And that's a role to play. And it feels awkward at first. One might think, this is a strange cult. These are strange people. This is a strange way of doing things. But one thing I really like about Fragments, or In Search of the Miraculous by Ouspensky, is that there are some passages that really point out how not free we are, and how we do things that we don't want to do, and how we are asleep even when we think we are awake. We're not making choices even though we think we have free will. We're letting our whims, we're letting circumstance, the environment carry us through life. And all the while, there's something under the current that knows it's not living life to its fullest potential. And then when one hears some of the things in Fragments, if that's their first introduction to the Gurdjieff work, they start waking up to freedom. It doesn't sound accusatory. It feels like something you'd been searching for your entire life. Knowing that you want to live life to the fullest, but you were codependent on others to wake you up. You didn't know how to word it consciously, and so this conscious sleep, this waking sleep, as Gurdjieff called it, it was just too oppressive. It was taking up too much space for the budding of this knowledge to grow. And the energy is there, and the energy comes through in Ouspensky's book, which is really something. And it comes down to something that Michel's mother said in her book, which is, we can either be unconscious slaves or we can be conscious servants. And that's what it comes down to. It's being guided by something other than us. We can give only what we have received, and even the person who really does extraordinary things can feel that it is not he who is doing it, that he is only a channel. And there's another role that I played in this life, which is Mr. Gurdjieff warned against explaining everything. To explain everything is to steal the experience of the other. That was the first quote that I really wanted to highlight. I am a serial explainer, and that makes me a serial killer. I want to be the smartest guy in the room. I have a drive. It's probably narcissistic, but I didn't ask for it. It's a voice, it's a feeling, it's a drive in me that wants to fulfill my life's purpose, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the ego has taken that and let that be fuel for the kind of behavior of trying to explain everything to everyone. And I'm not sure if I can find it, that I live by a philosophy one day and then dispose of it and live by another philosophy another day. And I'm always passing that philosophy off as if it's mine, as if I came up with it, trying to take some kind of egoistic credit for it. And I believe that's the kind of person that's being talked about in this book, the explainer, explaining everything and not realizing, just giving pause and meditating on the other. The other is experiencing. And say I've done something like watch a movie or play a video game, and I have a friend that is sitting down with me watching it for the first time, and I'm watching it for the second time or more. And I feel that urge to explain things, philosophize the film, talk about its thematic elements. And that's an ego stroking behavior. And the friendly friend that I have who's maybe too polite to say shut up, trying to watch the movie, they're distracted by my thoughts and they're divided unless they have a really good tuning out mechanism. And that's one example of that, stealing the experience of others. And so the default is to be quiet, is to let silence be the one who has the floor in most all situations. A lot of this is, it's a lot. It's heavy. I think the judo story about rewarding the student, the first shall be last. And then the next one about the sly man and the very slow, taking years to practice a real tea ceremony, to really be present and practice a real tea ceremony. You have to work for 20 years or more. And that's a good analog to the work. And there's a lot there. And then it ends with the concept of the image. And the ego works with the image. The reason I want to quote philosophers and kind of steal the conversation that has organically taken place that feels lowbrow, low IQ, mundane. Suddenly I want to steal the airspace and be the young philosophical student in the room, student of religious histories, student of the occult. All these are images. I dislike the image that I'm seeing of, they're discussing a Katy Perry or Lady Gaga song, or they're just talking about some Instagram reel they watched. Whatever it is, it seems trivial to my superior pseudo-intellectual mind. Kill the Buddha. Simple as that. Kill the Buddha. And Gurdjieff goes to an even greater extreme of saying your Virgin Mary is a whore. He meant it to be startling. He meant it to be shocking. It's interesting how saying that, even as someone who's not Catholic, it's jarring. And he's pointing out there the image that we've created, the fantastical and suspect image that we've created. And I think that's esoteric Christianity right there. Same goes for Christ. Yeah, so we've created these images of the Buddha, of the Virgin Mary, of Jesus Christ, of saints, of whomever who gets idolized. I think that's the proper term, is idolatry. He doesn't, they leave it as the word of image, and they're the same thing. The image appears here as an obstacle to true grace. So when it comes down to it, it's not condemning in religious language like thou shalt not worship false idols like the Bible does. But it's saying the same thing. The image appears here as an obstacle to true grace, meaning there's something on the other side of that image waiting for you that is so edifying. It feeds the soul. It's the true thing that you're seeking. But the image is something that we feel like we need to hold on to for dear life. That's all I'll do for now. Again, The Inner Work by Michel de Salzmann. You can get it on Amazon. I got it because my Gurdjieff Foundation teacher read us a quote on one of his talks, and I still don't know where the quote's from. I emailed the group and I asked where the quote was from, and my teacher responds back, reply all, like I said, it's from a lecture he gave in 1990. Of course, I wanted to respond back, I know you said that, but I was hoping it would be in a book so I could read it later. But I thought better of it, and so I just said, understood, thank you. It's good. It's good stuff. All right, everybody, be well.